Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my great pleasure to introduce our special guest today here at the Warsaw Security Forum, Maroš Šefčovič, EU Commissioner for Interinstitutional Relations and Foresight, very important, and indeed Vice President of the European Commission. Thank you very much for joining us today, Commissioner Šefčovič. A warm round of applause. I hope you can hear it all the way in Brussels, where I presume you are.
Of course I can, and it's always a pleasure to participate in the discussions which are always so well organized in Poland.
Thank you very much. Commissioner, I want to jump right into this. We only have 20 minutes, so it's a relatively short amount of time to discuss the big topic that we've been given. The pandemic, as you know, has presented, as you know better than just about anyone, has presented the Commission with, the EU, with enormous challenges, and the European Commission has, to be honest, received mixed reviews for its handling of the crisis. I'd like to begin by getting your perspective on the experience. First of all, just tell us what you've learned from this. You're a veteran in European Union affairs. As a commission, you've watched things. You've been through so many crises. This crisis, however, is a bit unusual, to say the least. What has the COVID pandemic taught you about the EU's ability to address a crisis on this scale and serve the interests of its citizens?
Indeed, you very nicely phrase and frame the conversation we will have. The first, I have to say that COVID-19 indeed got a lot of adjectives. One which very much stuck in my memory was that the political sciences described this pandemic as a great divider. And indeed, we have seen how this pandemic can divide the world, the countries, societies, and very often even the families. So indeed, the start was very difficult because we've been learning how to grapple with this new unprecedented challenge. And I have to say, if I look in retrospect and see where we even started in the spring of the last year, how difficult the spring of this year really was, when there was all the doubts if we would have enough vaccines, if they would arrive on time. I have to say that now, if you look at the summer and the latest Eurobarometer polls, I think that we can say that in the end we did pretty well. I would say as a democracy, as a EU, because we have highest trust in the EU institutions since many years. Two-thirds of the European believes that if it comes to pandemia, the EU will do the right thing. And also the trust in euro is the highest, I think, in the history. So that's quite a solid vote of confidence. And I think we earned it because we've been focusing, I would say, in this comprehensive way how to deal with the pandemic. Of course, the most important at the beginning was the health issue, how to deal with pandemic. We had to make sure that borders are open, that the critical health materials or food or indeed the raw materials for our factories would be circulating freely on our single markets. And then we also wanted to learn from the last financial crisis, where it took us more than 8 years to get back to the pre-crisis level, and therefore we indeed unleashed this enormous, unprecedented financial package to help our economies get started in the post-COVID period. And we believe that what took us 8 years the last time, now we are within the reach that within 18 months, we would be economic-wise into the pre-crisis level. So I think all that was enormous work, and I can provide you a few figures, what we did in the state aid, how much money we are pumping into the economy, because all these figures are very, very impressive. And I just would like to underline that now we have to keep the eye on the ball. We are not out of the woods yet. I would say new problems are coming to our shores. We see the soaring energy prices. We saw the new attention caused by the fact that economy started to accelerate, like the chip prices and others. I think we need to show that we are well organized, we are united, and that we are focusing on the right priorities.
You talked about figures. There are a lot of figures, of course, associated with this. There are a lot of negotiations that went into putting together the recovery package, of course. And it would be unusual if everyone was completely happy with the way that the pandemic has been addressed. It must be said that compared to the rest of the world, the EU has done pretty well in getting people vaccinated because one of the key metrics of how people perceive efficiency in addressing the pandemic is what percentage of the population have been fully vaccinated. These negotiations happened within the European Union context. Over 70% of adults in the EU are now fully vaccinated. They've had 2 jabs or maybe one of the Johnson, but there's huge variation between the different countries. We've got France, Spain, and Portugal and Ireland having more than 80% of the population fully vaccinated, but many Central and Eastern European states have only between 50 and 65% fully vaccinated, as you know. And in Romania, the figure is just 33%. I checked these figures last night. In Bulgaria, 23%. I'm just wondering what you make of that. How do you explain the massive gap in vaccination rates between EU member states, particularly the East-West divide?
I think that you're right, that it's indeed a very special phenomenon, if I could describe it in that way, because I still remember the enormous pressure under which we've been working and performing, especially at the beginning of the last year, because I think we took the right decision that if you want to get a good price and deliveries on time, if it comes to the vaccines, that we have to have this joint European approach. And I think it was indeed a bold decision of our president, Ursula von der Leyen, to go for that task, and she assumed the responsibility, and we've been carrying it on even through very, very dire moments, especially at the beginning of this year. And I still remember that what kind of tension we had among the member states, and not at least one European Council where the Prime Minister has been really worried if the vaccines would come on time, especially when we had this very cold and unpleasant spring this year. Paradoxically, now we are in a situation that, nobody speaks about the problems with the vaccines anymore. We have plenty of them. And this new challenge is on our table. How to overcome this vaccine hesitancy, this hesitation, which is in the mind of many people. And you rightly pointed out, mostly in Central and Eastern Europe. Is it because the first wave was so soft on this country? Is it because of the people tend to trust more of different theories which are, circulating around the social media? I think it's very difficult to answer. But what I think is very crucial to underline is that we have to step up the efforts and use the professionals, doctors, trusted personalities, really invest themselves as much as possible in the campaigns to convince as many Europeans as possible to get vaccinated. Because I think that it would have sooner or later impact on how the economy would recover, how the economies would perform. And of course, it has a direct impact on the number of lives we can save, and on the overall, I would say, atmospherics in the society across the EU. So it's a next challenge, which is, I would say, as difficult as making sure that we have enough vaccines for European citizens.
I just want to clarify a point. Just, do I understand you correctly that you're attributing the vast gap in vaccine rollout between East and West, you're attributing that gap entirely to vaccine hesitancy?
I think that's probably the major cause. As you know, I'm actually the neighbor to Poland. I'm from Slovakia, and I can tell you that I had the countless debates with my compatriots within my city, within my family, and sometimes, the arguments are extremely strong. And I think that what is really important is to make sure that the people have proper information coming from trusted sources, from the trusted personalities, because there is a lot of fake news on the social media which are discouraging people to get vaccinated. And therefore, I said that it's a huge challenge, because Of course, to get the vaccines to our member states was extremely difficult job, and the negotiation, the funding and financing of all that. I think it was extremely challenging. But it's something what you can do. We managed well. But now we have to convince the people that this is indeed the best prevention. This is the best they can do for their health, for the benefit of their family, and for the benefit of the country, and in fact, how for the well-being of the society, and for how they countries and their economies would perform.
Okay, thank you. I'll regard that as a yes. Let me put the question another way. Do you believe that the EU's handling of the pandemic has fostered a greater sense of unity among EU member states, or has it rather undermined cohesion and weakened confidence in EU institutions? Because this is how some people perceive it.
No, honestly, I think that, as very often it's said, that European cooperation and EU usually develops and growth with the crisis. And I think this was indeed the case. And as I said, the start was pretty rocky one. But if you look now at the results of the last year, that we became the big the vaccine manufacturer, that we've been able to supply enough vaccines not only to our citizens in Europe, but for each vaccine which was there for the European citizen. There was one vaccine which we've been exporting to really practically the whole world, to all countries around the planet. The fact that the lessons learned from the financial crisis led us to the unprecedented financial power instrument in the form of the next generation EU, that we are actually pumping into the economy 1.8 trillion euros. And if I compare that result with the very difficult discussions on the European budget for the 7 years, which we had until actually the crisis started, it's pretty amazing change. We also learn how to use and process very fast all the applications for the state aid, which was so crucial during the pandemic. The fact that we've been approving more than 30 COVID-related state aid applications per month, and in the end, the total volume of the state aid approved was more than 3 trillion euros. So if you just put all these huge sums of money on the table, I think it shows that despite of the crisis, we really pulled as the Europeans together, demonstrated big unity, invested a lot of money in dealing with the crisis, and we want to do it in a way that we would not be recreating the economy of the past, but we want to use this money to make European economy which would be greener, which would be more digital, and what is very important, and the lessons learned with which I work in my strategic foresight, more resilient. And what it means for Poland, I think Poland 2 years ago couldn't even dream of that there could be more than 140 billion euros directed towards Poland within this decade. It's an unprecedented sum of money which can really help the economy, the people, the renovation of the Polish industry in enormous way. And as you know, I'm also dealing with the smart mobility in the batteries, and I see what kind of strides the Poland is making in this very new innovative sector. So I think we learned from the past. We put the very solid proposals on the table. We dealt with the pandemic, put financial power into the use of the European economy, and therefore I believe that Europeans are kind of rewarding us with the positive points in the support which we have seen in the latest Eurobarometer.
Now, these funds that you've referred to, if you're mentioning Poland, of course, some of those are, they are tied to conditions. And these conditions, of course, are very, very hotly discussed within Poland. I don't want to open up that particular discussion right now. It is being discussed a great deal in public. The question of rule of law, of course, and institutional adherence to EU principles that is being connected to those funds. So that's another discussion I would love to have with you at some point. But because we only have a few minutes left, I want to put a question to you about the hat you're wearing in terms of strategic foresight, because this is a security forum, and we are looking to the future and thinking about how the European Union and indeed the transatlantic community can be made more resilient moving forward. The European Union has been discussed a great deal here over the past 2 days. People are wondering what the European Union is going to bring to the table in addressing the concerns of not just for this region, but for the world as a whole when we talk about strategic challenges. Last month, the Commission adopted its second strategic foresight report. You I know, were also involved in that. It addresses nothing less than, quote, the EU's capacity and freedom to act, end quote, laying out the EU's perspective on, quote, open strategic autonomy in an increasing multipolar and contested global order. It states that global rivalry and fragility are likely to increase, acknowledges the need to enhance defense capabilities and operations, and insists that action is needed to mitigate the increased risk of conflict, internal stability, and disruption of critical infrastructures. I would like to know from you, Commissioner, if you would address the audience here at the Warsaw Security Forum and tell us what kind of action can we expect from the EU to address these problems that you've identified?
Yeah, thank you very much for highlighting the strategic foresight report, because I'm the first commissioner who actually is responsible for what we believe is this modern anticipatory technique of governance. And I'm very glad that we see that strategic foresight is being used. More and more of the EU member states and the prime ministers are building up the units very close to them so they can actually use this modern governance technique. And indeed, our second strategic foresight report, the first one was on resilience. Again, lessons learned from the COVID-19 crisis, where we discovered how many bottlenecks do we have in our system. Our supply chain mechanism was not all working into our favor and variable. And the amplification of that lessons learned was that we have to do more with the term of open strategic autonomy. And once I'm talking to the security professional in Warsaw, I think what it means for us was very clearly into the contrast with what was not easy. I mean, the back to school period, where we had a harsh lesson which we had to factor in, and this was the way how the Western countries been living, and also the I would say negative surprise concerning AUKUS, where we saw that our trusted allies didn't take into account the concerns we had, and therefore what we are looking at is that we have to show in the economic front that we take all necessary precautions and in all economic to make sure that also in this post-2030 world that Europe would be the leading economic power, meaning that we would be among the top 3 global economies. And strategic technologies, we would not be only able to master them here in Europe, but we would have adequate skills, adequate raw materials to make sure that in technologies of the future we would play a role. Of course, if it comes to the security and defense, and again, we have to be more and to pull our strengths better than in the past. We are here in the Commission very strong transatlantists, and the first ever official visit of the Secretary General of NATO, Mr. Stoltenberg, to sit together with us in our official college session. We are working on the joint declaration. I'm working very with my good friend, Secretary General Mircea Joanna, on what would be our next strategic about, and this would be emerging technologies. I believe that we have to do more in the complementarity to the NATO, and let's say if we need to stay somewhere like at the Kabul airport for 2 more, so we can make sure our nationals and all those who've been working very closely with the European countries have guaranteed safe passage out this way, that we are able to do it. Because NATO is not everywhere. In some places, EU wants to be, and it's very difficult right now. And therefore, we are also looking at the possibilities how to enhance our defense capabilities, also to have ability to have autonomous capacities to act also in this field. But we will do it in the complementary with NATO, in very open, transparent, and I believe very collaborative way with our major allies. And I hope that the situations which we had in September would be better handled in the future, and therefore we are very appreciative of the last phone calls the American president, Mr. Joe Biden, had with the president of the Commission and his partners in the European Union, because it helps to build the trust. It helps to make sure that we as allies are talking to each other when the things are good, but also when the things are more difficult.
Mr. Šefčovič, thank you very much. We have like 30 seconds left. I hate to lose this 30 seconds. We have a difficult connection, but just very quickly, in 30 seconds, what would you say would be the largest contribution that the European Union could make to security in this region within the next 5 years, say? Very quickly.
I think, actually, for me, it's very simple. To make sure that we will have stable, prosperous democracies and economies in our neighborhood. That we will help Ukraine to be prosperous, democratic, strong country. That we will make clear progress with Western Balkans to start indeed the last stages of the accession process. And that we would project the positive constructive force in our neighborhood, also in the Mediterranean.
Minister Šefčovič, Commissioner Šefčovič, thank you very much for joining us here today at the Warsaw Security Forum. That was very insightful. I really appreciated having the chance to talk to you. Thank you for taking time from what I know is a very, very busy schedule to join us. Ladies and gentlemen, another warm round of applause for Commissioner Šefčovič. Thank you.